What's up, my Nimbugs? It's your boy Josh from the Elestrals, and today I'm bringing you an absolutely fire deck list. It's fire. We're playing fire. Fire got a lot of brand new tools in Frostfall that take this from one of the worst decks you could have been playing in base set to potentially a top tier meta contender. If you watch our tier list from a couple days ago, I personally ranked this at the top of the barrel in terms of new competitive decks. And why is that? It's because of a few new cards that we got. The best one in the set being Lavalith. We are playing 3 copies in this deck. Most decks are going to be taking advantage of this card, but Fire gets to take abuse of this in a bunch of different ways that we're going to talk about as we go through the profile. If you don't know what Lavalith does, it can be normal cast with 2 fire if your opponent has basically the same casting condition as resting on your laurels. And then you get to pop a back row, and he's huge, and he's 6. Pretty much beats over everything. Other new cards, we are playing 3 Co-Magma. This is the first good Nexus target that Fire has gotten, where if it receives 1 or more fire, you can draw a card and then discard a card to get you more consistency in your deck. Paired along with a card like Forge, it does go up to 5. To search out our Co-Magma, we are playing 2 copies of Smoltuga to also bridge together the rest of the Fire package, being 3 Kinleo. And we also are playing the 2 Necruffs. This deck does have a hard time dealing with bigger guys. Like Astravit is a problem for this deck if you don't see Kinleo plus a Nexus target. So Necruff is a really good inclusion with the field spell, which we'll talk about in a second. Smoltuga's just got a big ass. And Kinleo is basically just Earthquake on legs. It's nice we finally do get to be able to play this card because previously it just did not do a whole lot. And it makes the strategy of Fire a lot better. Moving on to other consistency cards, we are playing 3 Astrabbit. This card, again, not as common in every single deck as it used to be, although still incredibly powerful. 5 defense just doesn't carry as much weight as it used to in base set. A lot of cards are able to deal with it, like the Lavalith that we mentioned before. But being able to get to your consistency cards, getting to your counter runes is always going to be good in a deck like this. We are also playing Jolton. A lot more decks are going to be playing Jolton in Frostfall because of how crazy the stadium runes are. This deck in particular needs the feed spell, not for a card like Stoking the Forge, which also just came out in Frostfall, but as a Nexus bank for your Kinleo. Some people I know do play Hephaestus in this slot, as again more of a Nexus bank, but I would rather play cards that do something instead of cards that do absolutely nothing. And Jolting, getting a card out of the deck that also buffs all your guys is huge, which, speaking of which, you are just playing 2 Forge. The other interaction that's really interesting in this deck in particular is specifically with Lavalith and Poison Tip Arrow. Obviously, you don't want to Poison Tip a Lavalith if you have the option not to, but a lot of times Poison Tip comes up with Lavalith just for the attack reduction so that it doesn't get over something like Rabbit for the time being, so you have time to out it in another way. Lavalith with Forge turns him into an 8, which Poison Tip basically doesn't do anything if you cast the Forge after you cast the Lavalith to make him absolutely massive, and then their Poison Tip feels awful. For the rest of the deck, nothing too crazy. This deck does do really well going second, but it does have a particularly hard time breaking the Thunderboard, which is why resting on your laurels is very important in that matchup in general. It's good against a lot of things, especially if every deck is playing Stadium Runes. Resting on your laurels will always be active because they will always at least have 2 spirits on their field. We're also pairing it with the mandatory Ambrosia. Fire does go through its spirits quite a lot, so you're going to want to play it max out on the copies of Ambrosia. And then your standard huge counter rune lineup. We are only playing 10 of the standard ones that we were playing in Frostfall, with 3 Gorgons, 2 Tip, 2 Shield, 3 Tsunami, because we needed to make space for another card that also came out in Frostfall, and that is 3 Chains of Prometheus. If you're unaware of what Chains does, basically this is the counter rune hate card. Counter runes were such a huge problem in base set that they decided to make sure that counter runes were not as much of a problem anymore. All this costs is 2 Fire Spirits and it can only be cast whenever your opponent activates a counter rune. You can negate that rune, and then your opponent basically heals 1 from their Underworld to their Spirit deck. The reason that this is so important is that Fire previously had a huge issue with counter runes and sticking guys to the board, and Chains fixes a lot of those issues. Chains, in my opinion, is an auto 3 of in every single Fire deck for a pretty long time. This also guarantees that your Kinleos resolve. Your Lavalus, if they hit something else and they chain a different counter rune, then Chains feels even better, and you're outing 2 back row at the same time while keeping your Lavalith on board. Something else to note with Chains in other specific matchups, Chains does not do a super good job into the Lock-A-Gun matchup. We just posted a Lock-A-Gun deck profile the other day. I don't know if Caleb mentioned this in his deck profile, but I would never Chains whenever your opponent has a Lock-A-Gun up because it can heal and then pop a card. That seems to be the only matchup that Chains is kind of iffy into, and you would probably side this card out for something else. Probably just more removal, maybe even siding in some Earthquakes. But again, overall, Chains is an absolutely powerful card that needs to go in all of those strategies. Moving on to the Spirit Math, we are playing a bunch of Fire, especially because Fire is the main core of our engine. To facilitate the rest of our water package with the 2 small Tugas and the Tsunamis, we are only playing 3 Water Spirits, and then for our Rabbits and our Joltons, we're playing 4 Thunder. I think this rounds up to 13 Fire Spirits. So again, 13 Fire, 3 Water, and 4 Thunder. The inclusion of these 3 cards in Frostfall genuinely puts Fire into top tier. Maybe Kamagma not so much, but definitely Lavalith and Chains of Prometheus are forces to be reckoned with that will shoot this deck into top tier. I think it's also worth mentioning what are the good matchups that this deck has against the other top tier threats that we talked about in our tier list. Fire has really good matchups into Morfrost, especially because you have the ability to side Interruptions, which is devastating against that deck. And you also have a really good Thunder matchup, mainly because the amount of spirits of Thunder is going to be putting on board will almost always make your Lavalith live. You also are playing another Stadium Rune to counteract the Race to the Top strategy by getting rid of their Amount Olympus without having to pop it with a Lavalith. Hopefully I've done a good job of showcasing how Fire this Fire deck profile is. And if you want to see any of the other top tier meta threats coming into Frostfall, make sure to check out the other deck profiles that are already on our channel with Lock-A-Gon, Race to the Top Thunder, and Morfrost. And stay tuned to see all of the other Rogue competitors that we're going to be showcasing very soon. So subscribe, like, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out, my Nimbugs.